Welcome back to Echoes and Edges, the Broken and Beautiful podcast. I'm Patria, the host for Echoes and Edges and the owner of the Broken and Beautiful Collective. This is a space where we explore the stories that shape us, the patterns that form us, and the healing that helps us come home to ourselves. Today's conversation is one I want to invite you into slowly and with a great deal of care. Because we're stepping into something really sacred, the kind of space where pain has not only been endured, but transformed, where a life has been shaped not just by what was broken, but by the courageous work of becoming whole and healed. And you might be surprised about how we discuss what that means. Our theme today is this. What happens when your calling is born from wounding? Not in a way that glorifies pain, and not in a way that asks anyone to revisit what they're not ready to hold, but in a way that honors the costly and often unseen work of healing that can, over time, become a deep source of wisdom, presence, and compassion for self and others. I'm joined today by someone who carries that kind of wisdom. Sher Nyquist is a coach specializing in narrative-focused trauma care, often called story work, and EFT tapping. Her work is rooted in helping people gently and safely engage their stories, especially when words feel out of reach. And so in addition to narrative care and EFT tapping, which is to some degree work around beliefs and language, she also offers art and artistic methodologies to recover a sense of self. She brings together a rich and thoughtful integration of practices from internal family systems to somatic care, which is another word for body care, and creative work. It's shaped by her own lived experience navigating faith spaces, mission work, and the complexities of healing within systems that don't always know how to hold pain well, if at all. One of the most beautiful expressions of her work is storied art with Sher, where even the simplest forms of creativity like stick figures, color, and texture become a safe way to approach difficult stories, not with force, but with what she calls lavish tenderness. And I think that phrase alone tells you something about who she is. I am so honored to have Sher here with me. Welcome, Sher. So good to see you.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you, Patria.
Oh, it's just lovely to have you back. So, yeah, Sher, when you look back over your life, what do you notice about the connection between the places that hurt the most and the places where your voice carries the most authority now?
For me, I would say some of the places that really carried the most pain for me were the deep shame and that sense really that I had through so much of my life that something is wrong with me. I need to hide that from everybody so that I will have a place. So I think with the deep shame was so much insecurity, of course, and just not having a sense within myself that I offered anything other than what I could do. So I really worked hard in relationships to try to earn my space or even earn goodness and care. And I think the other really big pain point for me was loneliness. So shame, insecurity, and loneliness were three big areas of pain that I have carried and struggled with through a lot of my life. And I think it's interesting because our calling is born, I think, out of our experiences. out of the things that even can come possibly through developmental trauma. And our life or our personality is actually developed because we're just trying to survive and trying to endure our suffering and find freedom from our suffering, really. So I think for me, I can see very distinct correlations where those areas of deep pain have really been instrumental in helping me learn how to be with people, how to be able to go into a room and read a room, because my sense of needing to show up a certain way required that. I had to read the room so that I knew how to be when I was in the room. But I became very good at reading people's faces and nonverbals, and even having that empathy of feeling what people were feeling sometimes before they even knew. So I think a lot of those things really shaped me and helped me become very adept at being with people and being able to offer care and goodness. And so long before I had gone into my healing journey, I remember walking alongside of my friends in high school. And that people would often come to me to talk about their struggles, or help find a solution to this struggle that's going on. And so I think I sensed that calling very early in life, and I love that, really, that these are aspects of who I am that I love. But now I'm able to offer that from a very different perspective than I was when I was in my places of suffering.
Yeah, I'm struck by so much of what you just said, and I really hope that listeners are hearing you, because every word that you said, first of all, has been earned. You have not jumped over grief to say what you're saying in any way, shape, or form. But secondly, I'm really struck by the ways that you described the patterns that you've lived in, at least in the past. I don't know what you would say today necessarily. I hear you saying you love them, but I could hear some ambivalence, perhaps. That's maybe for a major portion of your life around these capacities, because the hypervigilance, you didn't say over functioning or over attunement, but I think that that's what hypervigilance is it's that over attunement, which is it's not really a word. I'm just making that up for context, and so I hear you saying it cost you to belong, to endure the shame of being you, to fill that void of longing for love and the insecurities that came with not really having a good picture of who you are, left you in this place.
I think just the reality that of the hard work that relationships, I think, really have been for me throughout my life. But that was normal. It didn't necessarily feel like hard work, because that was normal. I did work hard. I showed up. I brought everything I could to the table. And so the hypervigilance and the over responsibility, that was the norm for me. And so I think now that I'm in this space where I recognize that, whoa, that's not mine to carry, or I can have a boundary there, or I can say no to that. Those are things that I did not feel through so much of my life.
Yeah. Well, and that takes us to this next question, this idea of there's a difference between being shaped by pain and being defined by pain. And so in that vein, with those pain points and that way that you have had to work so hard and obviously have come to a different place now, how have you come to understand the difference between those two things, right? Because on the outside, it's going to look very much the same to anyone that knows you. This is an inside job, right? This is what's happening inside for you. So how's that defined differently?
Being defined by our pain is that sense of I am, right? I am a mess, or I am anxious, or it's those beliefs that we have about our own self that start with I am not acceptable, I am not worthy of love, and so when that is our identity, or what I define myself as, which I did, and we all, particularly if we've had childhood trauma, or probably, well, I'll say childhood trauma, complex PTSD. I think that there are, and maybe just if we're human.
Yeah, true. Good point.
Most humans struggle with identity, right? Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, and so I think being defined by my pain was when deep inside I knew that I was not acceptable or not worthy. And so I was functioning around hiding, as I said before, hiding, performing, and pretending. Those were three big hallmarks of my life, which of course I didn't see or know back then. So being shaped by that is, and this has been the journey of healing, has been allowing these places of pain to come to the forefront, to be exposed to a few, not the whole world, but a few, to be held, to be talked about, so that I could go from being identified by those things, and even recognizing, oftentimes having people name these things that I felt were unacceptable parts of me, and having sometimes those things being named as gifts, or aspects that I can offer to, to relationships or to the world, and being surprised by that. But until we allow someone else to see us in these places of our shame, we don't know. We only can define ourselves according to the way that we've always believed is true.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way we can get new data is by allowing someone else to speak into these places. But it can be excruciating, because I worked hard my whole life for those things to not be seen or known. So when I could allow others to see and speak and offer care or validation in some of these very places where there was deep pain, I could begin then to be shaped by the very things that once defined me in ways that kept me stuck, but now are the areas that I can say, wow, these ways that I developed to survive, who knew? They're also really helpful when I have a friend who's struggling, and I can be with them because I have a big capacity. I can hold a lot.
There's just so much about what you're saying that is important, in the sense of listeners who maybe are still trying to make sense of the wounding, the reactions maybe that they have to different people, or the overfunctioning in their life, or the hypervigilance. Yeah. Talk a little bit about what brought it conscious, because you mentioned, and I understand completely, that this way of being defined by your trauma, by the developmental trauma, the harm, wasn't something that you decided, right? It was normal. It was how you were in the world. So what's happened to start bringing awareness or shedding light onto this imbalance of what you were giving? Because you're describing this incredible gift to the world, even as early as high school. I think you said you had people sharing heartaches because they knew they could trust you and hold it. But yet you are being defined by loneliness. So, you know, that's a sense of you were not, it wasn't reciprocated. It wasn't mutual.
Yeah.
What started bringing light to that? And the second part of that is, what does it feel like inside? What are the differences inside in terms of experience?
I think I'll say going all the way back to junior high was my first awareness that, I'm seeing people around me function in a way that is something I've not known before. And then seeking out mentors. And so through really my life, I have sought out mentors and did a lot of work. I've worked really hard on my struggles or my shame since I was pretty young. And I've always had this big desire to be a good person. I really wanted to be a good person, but I felt like I wasn't. And so I worked hard I read books and I went to seminars and I started therapy when I was in my 30s and just trying to get free from the things that I really wished were not true in my life. And so I think that for me, in a sense, that started way back. But then, even though I did a lot of work and learned so much, I still was stuck until until about 6 years ago when I started story work. And that truly, and I know that we talk about that a lot, but when we can, for me, when I shared my first story and the particularities, like by that what I mean is the specific details in what happened in that, like maybe a 10-minute scene, and I wrote it out and then I read it to a group, and when I was met and again in a place that felt so shameful to me that it was excruciating in a way to read it, but then to look up and see, this was a Zoom group, and to see the faces on the screen looking at me with compassion, and then to be able to begin to talk about these specific details that had happened. And in one of my stories, and we all have many stories, and we might have some that are extreme trauma, and we might have some that don't even seem huge, maybe like even the interaction of how we are with one another around the dinner table. And yet when we bring forth some of these things and we talk about them, being held and accepted and offered care right there in that space, it blew my mind. It opened my brain to receive something that I never thought would be possible. And so the way that I felt began to change. Like, oh, maybe this doesn't mean I am bad.
Wow.
And then to have people really name that, I wasn't the bad one in the story. I think it was a story when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And I had always felt I was the bad one. I had done something. And so beginning to hear those other perspectives, it was profoundly impacting for me. And then I was hooked. I've been doing story work ever since. And I think I probably will for the rest of my life, because things still come up, right? We experience things that trigger us or cause us to get dysregulated, and then so now I when that happens for me, I often will think about, okay, what is this connecting to from my past? And to be able then to talk it through with someone, it take me from feeling either very anxious or going into being very shut down and disconnected to where now I'm able to stay present and feel what I'm feeling in my body and regulate my nervous system and receive care. And it's very significant. The difference from one to the other, just extremely significant for me.
I can hear that. And I had an image come right there of like the difference between battening down the hatches, pulling all resources in for the earthquake or the terrible earthquake or the tsunami that's coming versus being able to understand, implicitly understand in your nervous system that you can go through this and be okay. It's not final and fatal in these moments. And that's a big shift that you're describing. And I just so appreciate the language that you put to that feeling inside. It is hard to grapple with how to describe that inner experience, but I think you just put some incredible language. It wasn't the message that you thought would come, which was you're bad. And so just that first foray into light shining on this deep, dark secret that you were holding, which wasn't the trauma. It wasn't the bad things that happened to you. It was that you're bad. That was the belief. That's the deep, dark secret, right?
Yeah.
And so this first look with eyes of love, looking back at you immediately and completely forever, began rewiring your brain.
And I will even add that it's not that I had never had eyes of love looking at me before then, because I had. In friendships and even in therapy. But this, I think the unique thing here was that it was in the context of a story that held so much shame for me, that it was in that space that I was receiving what I thought was impossible.
We're going to get here a little bit later, but I just want to drop a little bit of a thread here about post-traumatic growth. And that comes from resilience, which nobody can define well. Nobody understands resilience and what makes it. We can measure adverse childhood experiences. Longitudinal study done in Southern California in the 80s and 90s, I believe, 1980s and 90s, that measure adverse childhood experiences, but nobody can get a handle on why some are resilient and some aren't. So I just want to drop that line. I'm sure we'll come back to that more. But yes, hope and courage, like there is something about the dirt of the story is what I call it. And I don't mean dirtiness or shame. I mean the particularity, the granularity, those pieces that only we know inside, and the courage that it takes to say that out loud for the first time to a group of people is outlandish. It's exceptionally off the charts difficult, and when it's done well, when there's a group that that's done their own work and can hold those stories with you, then it can just be profoundly life-changing. So I'm really grateful again for your language and description of that experience, the process. Thank you.
It's good to share it too. I think sometimes we can get further away from those first experiences and forget a little bit about it. But there's a lot that I can feel even right now as we're talking about it, and just remembering some of the things that happened in that. I think we were each person had 20 or 25 minutes. It wasn't a long period of time. It was enough though. but what happened in those 20 minutes literally changed my life.
As we close today's conversation, I'm struck by something Sher said. So often the deepest wound isn't simply about what happened to us. It's what we came to believe about ourselves because of what happened. For Sher, that belief was rooted in shame, loneliness, and the sense that she somehow needed to earn her place in the world. But what began to change everything was not more information, more striving, or more self-improvement. It was being seen. It was bringing a story into the light and discovering that compassion was waiting there. Next time, we'll continue this conversation and explore what actually happens when love interrupts shame. We'll talk about why healing is not simply about understanding our stories differently, but about experiencing something different, something our brains and bodies can begin to trust. Until then, may you remember that your story is worthy of care and that healing often begins where secrecy ends. Thank you for joining us on Echoes and Edges.